So will the new ANC leadership instill confidence in voters and investors? We chat to brand reputation management expert Solly Moeng. Good evening and thank you so much for joining us here on ENCA this evening as we conclude that 55th ANC elective conference. Now, I want to ask you, in the last couple of months, I've spoken to a number of analysts and quite a few of them have said that the leadership of the ANC at this point is completely moot, that declining ANC support and resulting coalition governments post-2024 are a certainty, that brand ANC is as good as dead in the water. And I want to get your take on where you think brand ANC is at the moment.
Hello, Ali, and to your viewers out there. Of course, brand ANC is dead. I mean, we know that the ANC fractures have not been healed. Ramaphosa and Zuma has not come together in public to hug, to say, okay, brother, we're now going to work together. And we all know also that this is all about the ANC appearing to look united, but it's failed in the past. It's not going to succeed in the future. There are people in there who shouldn't be in there, and Ramaphosa has not, and he cannot really, he doesn't have the power to appease Zuma, because I'm sure that Zuma and all those people around Zuma, many of whom are, implicated in serious activity around state capture and other forms of corruption, they belong to jail. They shouldn't be out there. The only thing Ramaphosa can give them, which would probably satisfy them, which he doesn't have the power to give them, is to say you can't go to jail. What I would have loved to hear Ramaphosa say was to say the criminal justice system, which is independent, must do what it must for South Africa. That's not what he said.
So I want to talk about how important renewal and unity are, because a lot of this conference, we've been hearing those two words repeated. The ANC must give a united front. We must be united in our goals and in our actions. The ANC, we must renew ourselves. But surely the ANC's renewal, the only aim of renewal can be to increase voter support by giving voters what they want, which is basic services. Other than that, renewal has no purposes. So what is the ANC talking about when they say renewal? Because we're not really getting that strong message of service delivery being front and center of their goals.
You're absolutely correct. Remember, what is good for the ANC has long ceased to be good for South Africa. What's good for South Africa has long ceased to be good for South Africa. For the ANC knows that its credibility, its reputational credit has been going down for a long time. And it also, but the truth is, the ANC still holds the electoral mandate to lead South Africa until the next general elections in early 2024. Until then, South Africa would have loved to benefit from a united governing party, which has become a misgoverning party, because one that is as divided as the ANC has been up to now is unable to come up with coherent policies for South Africa, economic policies, political policies. We don't know where we stand on a lot of issues, and that confuses the markets. That makes it hard for people to see, to make long-term decisions about investing in South Africa. So we do need to have whoever governs South Africa to be clear on where they stand on many things. So the ANC has just over a year to go. We would like to see, for the sake of South Africa, not for the sake of the ANC walking a bit more straight and not, dancing all over the place. But we know it's not going to be the case. The people who still want Ramaphosa out are still out there. They want Ramaphosa out. He may say all these beautiful things, like he said at the beginning of his turn. It doesn't mean that the beautiful words that he says necessarily reflect what is going on in the ANC. There are people, for instance, in KwaZulu-Natal who want him out of there, and they're not going to stop.
Another element that a lot of people were looking forward to seeing how discussions about the Integrity Commission's reports, the independent report on Phala Phala, and also the important step-aside rule. Those elements speak very strongly about the party's internal integrity and ethics. Yet nothing very conclusive came out of the conference where all three of those things were concerned. How do you think the voting public feels post this conference about the ethics of the ANC?
I think I do not believe that anybody is convinced that the ANC has got the message that South Africans want to see that we live in a country where there is equality before the law. There's no integrity in the ANC. There's no such thing as integrity coming. I mean, it's there, but what does it really mean? When people have committed crimes in South Africa, they have to be prosecuted. They have to be just like you and I. If we commit crimes, if we get hundreds of millions of rands into the country without going through the correct processes, and we don't pay taxes, we must be prosecuted, just like the ANC people, including the president of the African National Congress, should be. So there's no integrity in the ANC. The integrity of the ANC, basically, I don't know what it means. I mean, we've seen people being recycled over and over again. The thing with the ANC is that the pool of people that it always tries to get leaders from, so-called leaders, is very small. It's getting smaller and smaller, but also the people that are in there are discredited people over and over again. They try to recycle the same people. Look at the NEC. I have Nomvula Mokonyane, for God's sake. I mean, what do you want to do with Nomvula Mokonyane in the leadership of the ANC, which will influence the leadership of South Africa? What do you want to do with people like Andis, Lungile Andis, and people like Malusi Kigaba's name and a whole lot of other names that should not be in there? So the ANC is not renewing itself. Even Fikile Mbalola, Bheki Cele, their names are all there. Bheki Cele is the biggest failure in South Africa. Crime is terrible in South Africa. You can't have Bheki Cele. So much has come out that it has indicated that he cannot be the man. So the ANC is about the ANC. The ANC is not about South Africa. You're absolutely correct that a lot of emphasis was about, please, let's keep together so we can win elections in 2024. It's not about South Africa.
And it seems that part of the glue that a lot of the top leaders are hoping is going to keep the ANC together is that newly elected top seven, seemingly a top seven more favorable to Ramaphosa and his ideals and his way of leadership. But how important do you think the support of the broader NEC is to brand Ramaphosa and brand ANC? And important to that is, do you think that Fikile Mbalula, as the newly elected SG, is the right man to wrangle the broader NEC into shape and into discipline?
Well, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? I've listened to some of the things he's been saying this morning. He's going to step on a lot of toes. That's his style, and he knows that's his style. A lot of people are going to get upset at him. He doesn't seem to care what happens. He says, I'm the boss now. It is my job to instill the law of the ANC. That's what he said in one of his speeches. Is he the right person? I have no respect for him. Fikile Mbalula was appointed to become police minister at the height of state capture, soon after the former public protector, Thuli Madonsela, issued her report on Nkandla. Now, we know that during that time, the Guptas played a big role in appointing ministers. They would not have appointed Mbalula if they knew there would be risk for them. And throughout that period, Mbalula never looked at the Guptas. He never said, hey, let's go and see what's going on in Saxon world. Okay? So he mastered the art of looking the other way. Why was he so quiet when the whole country was crying over what the Guptas were doing in South Africa? Gwete Mantashe is the one who tried to get the banks to reopen Gupta accounts when the bank said, wait a minute, we can't, because it looks like there's a lot of illicit money going through these people's accounts. We can't keep them on. Gwete Mantashe tried to fight them to open those big accounts. So those people never cared about South Africa. Then they're not going to care about South Africa today. It's about the African National Congress. I think that we need to stop looking at South Africa from the perspective, from the prism of the African National Congress. There's the ANC, which is a troubled movement, and there's South Africa. It's a pity that the ANC still has the electoral mandate. We should respect that, but South Africa needs to unshackle itself from the African National Congress. Otherwise, it's going to keep going on with this hard knee pressed on its neck. It will never realize its potential.
In terms of brand reputation, it doesn't really seem that they are standout, strong leadership options for South Africans to turn to when the ANC keeps disappointing us. What do we as South Africans need to do to find not that golden ideal, because I think we're quite realistic at this stage that doesn't exist, but where do we go to look for leadership that is going to stand the test of time and that are going to put people first as opposed to politics of the stomach?
I think we need to change the way we think about South Africa. South Africans need to get together and say to themselves and we must say to ourselves, what kind of country do you want? What are the values? What is acceptable? What is not acceptable? We have to learn from what happened over the past 10, 15, 20 years of state capture. Why did this thing happen? How did it come to happen? What kind of measures do we put in place to make sure it doesn't happen again? It's not just about changing faces, but changing a less dancing face to a more charming face that speaks better English. It's about looking at the systemic changes that need to happen to South Africa. And unless we have those discussions, they're not going to happen. And we need to move away from thinking that there's going to be a Mandela-esque figure coming to save South Africa. All these people who are forming political parties thinking I'm going to be the next big thing, they're making mistakes because they're splitting the opposition even further. The ANC will remain the Makulu bus of South African politics. What needs to happen is people must rally together, come together, and leave their egos aside and say, let's agree on something for South Africa ahead of the 2024 elections, so that we get to remove the ANC. Without removing the ANC, we're going to be having this conversation again, with the ANC having recycled a lot more of its people who are so dodgy. There's nobody else. We're going to be made to believe there's nobody else to put in leadership positions. So the ANC, South Africa must organize itself outside of the ANC. These people who are forming political parties on their own, thinking they're going to be the next big boss, must ditch their egos aside and work with others across the board for South Africa. That's what must happen.
So we've got 18 months until those national elections in 2024. 18 months may seem like a very long time, especially when load shedding keeps hitting us and dragging the hours, but it can go past very, very quickly. But in the interim, in those 18 months, we really need to get the best for South Africans, and that means managing our economy, and that means managing investor confidence. So we've seen earlier this month markets reacting very aggressively to those rumors that there was a possibility that President Ramaphosa was going to resign. We saw them react this past weekend when we saw a little bit of insecurity and uncertainty about political leadership. And we saw them react positively when President Ramaphosa secured that second term. So the instability of political leadership has a massive impact on the economy and on South Africans' earnings, if we put it that way. So how do we manage Brand SA and the impact that the ANC shenanigans have on that brand?
I think South Africa needs to swallow a bitter pill. It'll be bitter for a little while, and the bitterness will go away. Of course, the markets will react the way they do when they see a potential of instability. But the thing is, with Ramaphosa being reappointed, for them, what's good for the market is also not necessarily what's good for the man in the street in South Africa, because the market just wants stability. They want to have a sense that things are not going to get worse than they have been up to now. But it's not like they're concerned about public interest. If the ANC were to fail really tomorrow, it will be painful for a little while. But South Africans have it in themselves. We've done it before. We can do it again. To stand up again and say let's organize. Right now we are holding on to one man. We cannot have a country whose fortunes rely on the goodwill and the good health of one man. It's nonsense. South Africa has had institutions before, independent democratic institutions. We should work at strengthening those institutions so that no one man, whether his name is Ramaphosa or Zuma or Soli Moeng or Zazibi or somebody else, will on their own determine the fortunes of the country. And that's a problem. We can't have a country whose fortunes rely on one man. We need to strengthen our institutions, forget individuals.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us this evening. That was brand reputation management expert Soli Moeng chatting to us as we conclude the 55th ANC elective conference in Nasrec this past weekend.